So I want to talk about this phenomenon of hatred as it is known. And although in some ways you can't really talk about it without including which is greed and delusion is another good word. It's very easy to greed, hatred, and delusion often brought up a problem. Referred to as like the three poisons, right? Easy to hear that and go, oh, okay. I'm really against hatred and delusion. That's an understanding. Greed, hatred, and I'm really creating one who doesn't have any greed, hatred, and delusion. And once I become that way, then things will be awesome. But right now they suck because I'm not there yet. So I can't really be in the present moment. But in the future, once I get rid of all my greed, hatred, and delusion, then I'll be the kind of person I want to be. And then always and then the delusion side, which is just this feeling of like, what's he talking about? What? Now, with delusion is also can be thought of as a kind of they all work very intricately together, because another way of thinking of delusion is when we become so absorbed by some kind of experience that we lose ourselves. We lose our presence. Like I was watching some of the Republican convention, and it was interesting because as I was watching it, I was sometimes not clear, like, am I seeing more hatred or am I seeing more delusion? You know? And I'm not saying that, just to sort of criticize, but when there's all this hatred and someone's consumed by it, that's a kind of delusion as well. You see what I mean? And that you have now lost your sense of self and you're just like consumed by this experience. And then it, causes you to come up with all kinds of delusional political policies. It's kind of, you can think of it as sort of being the opposite of wisdom. In the way that wisdom comes from seeing clearly, really seeing clearly the way things are. As I mention often, when the Buddha was awakened, when he was enlightened, it always says he was awakened and he saw reality as it really was. Meaning that he wasn't consumed by his greed or hatred or delusion. You see what I mean? And that he was free of it enough that he could just see things as they really are. Not, because mostly the way we see reality is not as it really is. We mostly see our reaction to it. So something's happening and I really like it or I really hate it. And we see it through that lens. Does that make sense so far? So what I wanted to talk about tonight, or kind of this subtle yet very important misunderstanding that I want to address, where one thinks it's about getting rid of greed, hatred, and delusion. It's more about, like as I just referred to it as a kind of lens, right? That you're seeing it through the lens of greed or hatred or delusion. So part of this practice is actually learning to see the lens itself. So for all of us, our perception, it's happening through a certain lens, if you want to call it that, right? It's a certain slant, a certain point of view, if you will. And we want to learn to be conscious, be aware of the point of view. Now, I can save you many years of practice. It's kind of one of my things, is I would love to spare you the many, I almost wanted to say wasted years, let's say delusional years that I spent in the practice. And you can skip ahead if you just trust me on the fact that there's always a lens. I spent many years denying this because I was like, no, I'm a good Buddhist. I'm just seeing reality as it really is. I'm very impartial. I've been sitting a lot, so no. I am not caught up in these things. Which was just really just craving. I mean, it was just me wanting to have that self-image, right? It's like I wanted to be a good Buddhist, so I heard that good Buddhists aren't caught up, aren't attached. You've heard that, right? And so it's very easy to go into this thing where you're just kind of in denial about it, you know? Where you like to think that you're not attached or that you don't have greed or hatred or delusion. And that's very delusional, actually. So what's important with this is that we just let ourselves actually be honest and see the lens, to see the veils that are in the way of clear seeing. And this isn't a judgment. This isn't like a failure. It's actually what awakening is all about, is to own these things and see them clearly. It's not about getting rid of these things, because getting rid of them is just another form of hatred, right? And by hatred, anything in that whole category, it's like hatred, aversion, rejection, anger. I actually find that fear is also very much in that camp. One way to think of it is it's anything where the energy is this. And then greed, on the other side, is just where the energy is this. So greed, craving, desire, longing, all of this, grasping, clinging, attachment. That's all. And I guess if this is craving and this is aversion, delusion is like, huh? What? It's sort of just not being awake, not being honest, not being clear. And with that one too, the interestingly, like the quickest way to get clear is to just see that you're not clear. Right? Like the moment you say, oh, I'm totally confused, it's like that's actually a moment of awakening. All these things, all three of these things, they only have power over us when we don't see them. The point is the way that they take us away from the present moment. You see what I mean? So if I'm sitting here and some hatred kind of comes up and I'm like, yeah, fuck that shit. Yeah, like, it's like I'm gone. I'm now consumed by that hatred. And I'm no longer present. So you want, in some ways it's like you want these things out front where you can see them. These things have a lot of power when they're kind of back here, kind of running the show from the shadows. And it's all about, we sit and we allow ourselves to really see what's happening. And I kind of think of it as, sometimes I actually experience it in this way where I sort of like take this step, like I'm in this experience, and I sort of like take this step back and I kind of see the experience in front of me. And sort of a metaphor, but do you know what I mean? Where you're like, oh yeah. And I kind of experience this practice often as just this never-ending step back or out or whatever. I mean, it's kind of metaphorical, like I said, but it's like stepping back and seeing and letting the perspective sort of get more and more wide and encompassing. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really confused. Like, oh yeah, there it is. There's confusion. Then it's, like I said, it's kind of out in front where we can see it. And then that way we're not caught in it. Maybe we can be present with it. And the one I've been interested in lately is hatred in particular. Because I've been catching it. I've been catching some pretty strong feelings of hatred arising in me. And it's been quite educational, really. I don't remember, I think we talked about this last time. I don't remember if I shared this specifically, but just a couple of weeks ago, I had this experience where I was watching some clip from some Fox News show, and it was some panel of Fox News people talking. And it was just so infuriating, you know? It was just the most typical, like, just dishonest, manipulative, ignorant bullshit. All delivered with that total smug, self-assured arrogance. And they were just going on and on. Self, like, these people shot. Yeah. I didn't know what I was, like, this feeling it was, because it doesn't even exist, but there was this, man, if our side would love to firing. Cultivate a little bit. I was like, holy shit, check that out. Check out these. I was like, wow, man, you know, in this moment, actually worse than what they were saying was, they weren't talking about shooting anybody. They weren't talking to disagree with them. That was me. That's what I was feeling. And it was a real kind of moment of clarity for me, because I felt it so strongly that I felt like I had this insight into like all this hatred. It was almost like it allowed me to, I almost had some empathy. I was like, holy shit, is this how people are feeling now? Like this is that energy. And it made it very real. I was like, oh, right, this is how it happens. This is how this sort of disease of hatred spreads. And I've been finding it quite disturbing, even when I look at what's going on the left, on the liberal side, which I'm in support of, but it's actually getting pretty hateful and really intolerant. And to me, it's not about what side you're on as much as it, like, how much are you hating? Because you can just fill in the blanks, like, I'm on side X and I disagree with anybody else, and I hate everybody who isn't on my side. And then does it really even matter? Like, are you on the right, on the left, or some other party, or that's what it really comes down to. It's like hatred is hatred. And I really got this strong sense how I was like, holy shit, this is what spiritual practice is really all about, or at least a big part of what it's about is refusing to hate. it's so tempting, especially right now. I mean, there's just never been a better time to get your hate on, right? I mean, apparently it's all the rage. Like, hatred's really making a comeback. And I think we need to really be careful when we feel that our hatred is justified. Because that's how everybody feels, right? Like in their mind, whatever hateful people you can think of, like in their mind, they think they're right. Just like when I'm hating, I think I'm right. They all seem crazy to me, but I'm right. And I think the invitation of this practice is not to act as though this doesn't happen or as though this doesn't apply to us. The invitation of this practice is to see it clearly when it does. Is to actually take responsibility for it. And to not judge it and not even reject it, but to not be consumed by it. To not indulge it. Because it's very tempting. You know? You know that self-righteous indignation? It's a pretty delicious feeling, isn't it? Like when you're just like, fuck that, I am right. Like that asshole. But when you look around at all the problems in the world, isn't that what's causing it? I mean, underneath it all, isn't that where it goes wrong? And so, you know, we can for different causes and be involved in all kinds of movements and but what's going on? And that I stuff is apparently he said, yeah, the most important thing is for like down, right? Inside ourselves. And so what we're really it is the problem. They say that greed, hatred are the problem. It's even interesting because second note, which is the cause of, but actually, in a lot of other series, more fundamentally, he says that the actual problem is not really knowing how things work. So the to it. We're not to hatred or to aversion. Relationship. When we feel, oh man, I've been this time, I've still got hatred, of it? Just more hatred. I hate myself for, and the answer is, I'm just going to get, if I can if only I can, I would be happy. And internally, it's if only I could get rid of these traits of mine, or these feelings I have, or these aspects of my personality, or these extra 20 pounds of body fat, hypothetically speaking. But it cultivates this reaction, this reactivity of rejection. Like, I can't be here, I can't be present until the right things are gotten rid of. And it doesn't just stop internally, right? And then, if I'm in some position of power, well, it's not just what's wrong with me, but it's what's wrong with all of you. So let's get rid of, I don't know what, immigrants, minorities, laws I don't like, limitations, I mean, you name it. But that's hatred, right? And you see it in politics, like when the answer is we need to get rid of this, that, those people, right? It's this. Because the issue in the end is, how can we be here? How can we be present right now? Without falling for the fantasy that, well, no, it'll be better once I get rid of X, Y, Z. Or the craving, no, it'll be better once I get A, B, C. Which all amounts to, this isn't it. This moment right now, this reality, this here and now, it's all wrong. It's not it. I can't be with this. I got to build a wall, apparently. Then I'll be happy. And what the Buddha is saying is, as long as that's your orientation, you will never be happy. It will never come about where you're like, there, I have finally gotten rid of everything that bugged me. And now I can just chill. Or conversely, I finally got everything I ever wanted, and everything is just right. And now I can relax. What the Buddha is saying is that in every moment we are practicing. In every moment we're cultivating capacities. Whether you know it or not. There's no no practicing. Because you're always training something. I mean, even if you're completely unconscious of it. So if you're caught in that hatred and you're always thinking, how do I get rid of this or how do I get rid of that? That's being cultivated. And you get really good at it. And then nothing's ever good enough. Because the antidote to this, I mean, this is interesting that according to the Buddha, greed and hatred aren't opposites of each other. He actually says they're kind of the same thing. They're just sort of a flip side of each other. The opposite is love. The opposite is loving kindness. The opposite is is openness. So there's so many things about this moment that aren't quite right, that don't quite fit our vision or our plan or our ideas on how things should be. But the question is, can we love that anyway? Can we not take this very seductive invitation to hate and to reject? And can we actually allow our hearts to remain open and to love what is, especially the imperfections? Because that's what love is for. Love is the capacity that we're endowed with that allows us to be with what is. To be with all the things that are imperfect. Because if something's perfect, it doesn't take love. Right? If something or somebody's perfect, that's you just getting exactly what you want. I mean, love's actually not necessary for that. That just works. You're just like, great, this just meets all my, this is just what I want. It's just common sense. You don't even need love. You're just like, yeah, this just works for me. I have no problem with this. Do you see what I mean? You don't need love. Love is the lubricant that makes it possible to be with things as they are. First and foremost, to be with ourselves as we are. Because really, the place where some of the worst hatred is going down is within ourselves. Our own aversion and rejection of ourselves, of our own experience. That's really where it takes place. And as many spiritual teachers have argued that the external hatred, the acted out hatred, the acted out brutality and cruelty and injustice, that comes from the hatred that we have within. You don't see it where someone's like got love and compassion for themselves and they can really be with themselves and whatever arises for themselves, and they have that kind of self-tolerant, kind, compassionate point of view. But then they enact but let's create concentration camps for those people. It doesn't work like that. These things are inextricably linked. And all this horrific stuff we see going on all around the world, it's that same thing. It's that hatred just being acted out and projected outwards. Because hate is hate. Hate is hate. You know what I mean? It's not like, well, the hatred I have towards myself is different than I have towards others. No. It's just that energy, and it's been cultivated. And it's been cultivated and practiced. And that's kind of what you have right now. You have I wouldn't want to, these sanghas, so to speak. Like this is a sangha where we come together to practice together, to help support each other in learning and practicing and cultivating compassion and loving kindness and openness, right? And then there are, and I mean, you use the sangha, word sangha as a joke, but right, that's what they are. Sort of like communities where like, hey, let's get together and really cultivate hatred. Let's like support each other in this practice of hatred. And that's exactly what it is, right? And then they just get that feeling going, and it just escalates and grows. Ajahn Chah, one of the main fathers of this lineage, said that there's nothing more helpful or useful you can do for the world than to still your own mind. So for me, it becomes like a politically active practice to just refuse to hate. To not pick that up. Not to deny it. I see it. I see it real clearly. But not to pick it up. Not to buy into it. And in closing, before I open it up to questions, I want to say that it's very helpful to see it, to not deny that it's there. Denying that it's there gives it actually a lot more power. Right? Does that make sense? Because then, then like we're like puppets on these strings. And it's very important to not deny that. It's very tempting to be like, no, not me. I'm not like that. Bless you. And when you see that, to see that as that kind of delusion, even if you catch yourself going, no, not me. Like, oh, cool, check that out. There's some delusion. Oh, great. Like, hello, delusion. Because you want these things in front of you where you can see them. And that way, we don't fall for them. We don't buy into them. And surprisingly, even hatred and greed and delusion can in turn be held with kindness and love. And that's very important to see that. So you could see it like, oh yeah, I'm really hating right now. And just to be like, yeah, I understand that. Like I have compassion for that. And you see your own anger. It's like, oh yeah, wow. Yeah, it's a lot of anger. That's hard, right? I mean, it hurts. It's painful. And so by cultivating this capacity to be with it, you actually then don't have to act it out. I mean, that's kind of the amazing thing is when people act these things out, it's because they can't be with it. They can't just sit there and go, wow, I'm really hating right now. I can really feel it. It's like they can't be with it, so then it's just like, it's just being acted out. And then, tremendous amounts of harm and damage are done. And it perpetuates that whole cycle. This is what the Buddha means by liberation. The liberation from being driven by these impulses. So I want to just leave a little time for questions or comments. If anyone wants to share. Or questions about anything.
three items that you mentioned, um, starting with greed, for example, they seem very vague to me.
Vague?
Yeah. I mean, isn't love even a form of greed?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately you do it because it makes you feel good?
Yeah, that's a good question. He said that, he was saying that he thought kind of these terms, greed, hatred, and delusion, are a little vague. And he was asking for clarification because he said, well, isn't love kind of like greed? Like, isn't love like a kind of grasping? And you do it because it feels good. You know, the thing about greed, hatred, and delusion is when you see them clearly, they don't actually feel good. There's a lot of suffering in them. And with something like love, the Buddha actually talked about, he had a good list that he called near enemies. So with love, you have your enemies, which is like, so the opposite of love, like would be hate. But a near enemy, which is something that like, it looks like that thing and sort of feels like that thing, but it's not. And so with love, it's grasping or possessiveness. And so, if you've ever been in love, but it's actually causing a lot of suffering, we've all been there, it's because it's not really love, it's craving, it's grasping. And so there's a distinction between, in this case, I mean, you know, another word that he actually uses for grasping and desire and all those is lust. And so this is the difference between lust and love. So love, in its real form, is not about owning or controlling or having. It's actually a very altruistic kind of feeling where there's a real love and care for, you know, the person or the place or the thing, whatever it is. But this, you know, they usually often come together, with an unwise relationship. There's like, well, yeah, but I've got to hold on to this, you know.
So is all wanting greed?
Is all wanting greed? It's a good question. I'm not sure. It does feel like, sometimes I do feel a kind of wanting that doesn't feel self-centered. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have plenty of wanting that feels very self-centered. Like, no, I want this. And I really have to, and if I don't get it, I won't be okay. Or if I get it, then things will be good. So there's this sense like, no, this present moment is somehow deficient. It's deficient, it's somehow inadequate, it's sort of not enough. And I better get that thing or else. And there's a kind of underlying fear in it. There's a kind of like craving, kind of jonesing, addictive quality to it. And I do notice that sometimes there's sometimes a kind of desire to like share or to help, or to be of service. But even there, it's tricky. When I look closely, yeah, like part of it is a kind of a generosity. But you know, there's still personality mixed in there. So there's also like, and won't I look good doing it? You know? And I don't think it's black and white. I think it's always like, yeah, it's like somewhere, you know, when I look at myself at least, it's somewhere in the middle of that. I don't know that I've ever had, if I looked really closely, I don't know if there's ever been where I was, you know, just being, I don't know, so giving or generous or altruistic, and there was just no part of me whatsoever that wasn't also aware that, like, good job, you know? But it's ego, I mean, and that's there. I don't, again, with that same thing, I don't try to eradicate that so much as I try to see it clearly. Try to just own that and be like, yeah, you know, some of that's going to be in there. And by seeing it, then I feel like it doesn't control me as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
So I studied A Course in Miracles, and I think I felt this even before I started reading it and studying it, that anything that is not love is a call for love.
Anything that's not love is a call for love?
Yeah. So like, that all of the circus is a call for love, and that maybe it's my delusion, but it seems to me like a quick route to imagine them as children, and the pain that triggered their not being able to be loving. And so I don't know if I'm delusional enough that I don't get in touch with the initial hate feeling, but maybe you could speak to that.
You're saying that you find it helpful to imagine the person as a child? Yeah, that's a great tool.
But also, it almost feels like it's an immediate thing. Like, even like I remember way back, not so far back, but at the Paris bombings. And there's this part of me, I guess, some aversion to wanting to call it a terrorist attack. Like, I would rather see all these things as a call for love. And I guess maybe it's just this wish that if it would be seen as that, then it would diffuse it. It would almost be like they're calling themselves out in a way.
Yeah.
But I don't know if is that delusional? Like if I don't feel... I know that I definitely have some hate because I have this irritation even with all Midic, like the haters.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, let me say this. When you ask, like, is it delusional? The part of that that is delusional, and I don't mean this. This is what I want to stress. I don't mean it critically,
no, I don't
right? Like, because we want to see the delusion. The part of that is delusion is that you're asking me because you're not consulting your own direct experience. So if you approach that as not so much trying to get the right answer or wanting to do it right or wanting to even, be skillful, which of course we want to be, but more than anything, right, this is about being present and really being curious about these things. This isn't like, hey, I went to this Dharma group, I heard these things, I need to try to do these things. This is all an invitation to actually just get to know yourself, to get to know ourselves in a very deep, very intimate, very direct way, where it's not ideas and concepts, and definitely not even Buddhism. Forget Buddhism. It's just a bunch of ideas. I mean, I'm just somebody out just talking. This is nothing. What actually matters is your own direct experience. And so you can just be curious and check it out. Like, hey, is there hatred there? I don't know. Let me check it out. Like I don't know. Am I like missing something? Am I not missing something? How does that feel? What am I aware of in my body? A kind of inquiry where you just explore all this stuff. And that's what, when you say then the Buddha just saw things as they are. Meaning, can we just be present and just be curious and just to study ourselves, just to study this phenomenon of being alive, and yeah, where like emotions arise and thoughts arise, And we can just watch these things and we gain insight through just studying them, through seeing them so clearly. So we go, oh, and you don't have to get it all at once. It's just, it'll keep, it's like anything else in life. The more you dedicate yourself to something, to anything, the more it reveals. And so that's what I'm really inviting you into, is that relationship with your own experience, where the truth will reveal itself. At the end of the day, this is all just a bunch of words. They're hopefully they're little guideposts, little arrows. But hopefully they're all pointing you back to your own self and to just the truth of this experience that has in it has everything in it. It's all inclusive. And sorry, we're just about out of time, but I do want to say one last thing just because it feels important, is that I do think the delusion that we're all suffering from in the world, and big time, is that we think there's an us and a them, and that the suffering, that group, like what you're saying, would you say it's a call for love? The call for love is happening across all of humanity. Do you see what I mean? How that there isn't a them? Like we here, we're us, right? And imagine if we go out in the world to find them. We're like, well, let's go talk to them. And just imagine you go out there and you come up to other groups and you go, hey, are you guys them? And they would be like, well, no, we're us. And we say, well, no, we're us. Who are you? We're like, well, no, we're us. And you'll never find anyone who will say, yes, we're them. And the ultimate delusion is what the Buddha talked about, is the separation. Is the delusion that we're not all one. So really, like the way I see it, if you that step back I talked about? If you step back far enough, it's just this planet with a bunch of beings on it that are suffering. And yes, in their particular little point of view, they think it's about this and it's about, but really it's just a bunch of pain and suffering. And, the near enemy of compassion is another, big Buddhist virtue is compassion. What's interesting? You know what the near enemy of compassion is? Pity, yeah. And pity is so close, right? It's sort of like, oh, poor guy, poor girl. Oh, that really sucks for you. Right? It's like, oh, them, I feel so bad for them. Like not me, like I'm not really part of it. But they over there, I have so much compassion for them. But that's the delusion. It's really compassion for us. Like all of us, like we're all in it. And it's just getting, the way things are going, it's just getting tighter and tighter, isn't it? I mean, it's really hard to have that delusion. It's getting harder and harder to have that delusion. Anyways, see, right now I have deep craving for more time. But luckily I can see that. Lucky for all of you, I can see that. And so I will end it here, but I'm tempted to just keep everybody late. Announcements?
I've got announcements.
You've got no announcements?
Just say I'm the new manager, Brett. Come say hi if you ever
There's Brett, everybody. I'm sure there's flyers up there for all cool stuff coming up. And lastly, announcement about the Donna, the donation basket, or it's not even out there at the moment. You know, this center is totally run on donations, supported by you guys. So I just want to say that we really appreciate your support, and we need it. It's real. Like this building, these programs, these teachings, they're all given through your support and through your generosity. So, thank you. So just to, we do this little ritual at the end where we dedicate merit. And the idea behind this is that in Buddhism it's believed that when people come together and practice, that there's some kind of goodness, there's some kind of merit that's just generated by the very fact that we're here. And who knows what form it'll take, but it's just considered, just because of the goodness of it, that there's this merit generated. And so we dedicate and share this merit. And so if you bring your attention back to your body, and just notice how this experience has affected you without figuring anything out. Just let yourself receive whatever impact it's had. And maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Maybe this was like a very frustrating, irritating experience. Just let whatever is there just be there. Don't reject the experience, no matter what it is. May the merit generated by us coming together like this, as a community, as a sangha, to practice together, to support each other's wakefulness and groundedness that allows us to see reality clearly, that allows us to see our own greed, hatred, and delusion without rejecting it, without trying to hide it, so we may cultivate and develop a wise relationship to these very natural yet damaging energies that cause a lot of suffering for us and others. We dedicate and share this merit with beings everywhere. May we all be free. Thank you very much.